The rain had been falling over Brooklyn for 3 hours straight. The kind of October rain that soaked through jackets and chilled you to the bone. Riley Murphy watched the droplets race down the diner's front window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. The neon sign of Betty's Diner buzzed intermittently above, casting pink and blue shadows across the wet pavement of the nearly empty street. "Riley, honey, you heading out?" Betty's growly voice cut through her thoughts. The 72-year-old owner was wiping down the counter with the same faded yellow cloth she'd used for the past decade. Riley glanced at the clock above the kitchen pass rough. 10:47 p.m. "Yeah, just finishing up the last table." She gestured toward booth 7 where a tired-looking truck driver was nursing his third coffee refill. "Go on, I'll handle him," Betty said, waving her off. "You've been on your feet since 2. That's a double shift, kid." Riley managed a small smile. "Thanks, Betty. I'll just take out the trash on my way." "Always the responsible one," Betty muttered. But there was affection in her tone. "Don't forget your umbrella this time." Riley retrieved her worn canvas jacket from the hook near the kitchen and grabbed the 2 trash bags sitting by the back door. The umbrella sat right where she'd left it that morning. She picked it up, then set it back down. The walk to her truck was only 20 feet. She'd survived worse. The kitchen's fluorescent lights flickered as she pushed through the back door into the alley. The rain hit her immediately, cold and insistent. Riley hefted the trash bags and moved quickly toward the dumpsters at the far end of the narrow passage between Betty's Diner and the abandoned textile factory next door. Brooklyn at night had a particular quality, a mix of distant sirens, the hum of traffic from the expressway, and the constant rhythm of the city that never quite slept. Riley had lived here her whole 26 years. She knew which streets to avoid, which shortcuts to take, how to keep her head down and her keys between her fingers. She tossed the first bag into the dumpster, the metallic clang echoing off the brick walls. As she lifted the second bag, a sound made her freeze. Crying. Not just any crying. The desperate hiccuping wail of an infant. Riley's heart seized. She dropped the trash bag, its contents spilling forgotten at her feet. The sound came from behind the larger dumpster, deeper in the shadows where the alley deadened ended. "Hello." Her voice came out uncertain, swallowed by the rain. "Is someone there?" The crying intensified, now clearly 2 different voices. 2 babies. Riley's feet moved before her mind fully processed what she was doing. She rounded the dumpster, her eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness. The narrow beam of the security light from the diner's back door barely reached this far. Then she saw them. 2 infant car seats sat on the wet asphalt, sheltered partially by a fire escape above. Something in his desperation gave her pause. "Please." The word came out as barely more than a breath. "Please." Riley's mind raced. Every rational thought screamed at her to call for help, to do the right thing, the legal thing. But she looked at the 2 babies, still crying in their car seats, and then back at this man who was barely clinging to consciousness, yet still held on to them with everything he had left. She thought of her father bleeding out in a twisted car wreck 3 years ago while she held his hand and waited for ambulances that came too late. She thought of her mother who'd survived the crash only to die 2 days later in a hospital bed, calling for Riley with her last breaths. She thought of all the nights since then she'd lain awake wondering if she could have done more, saved them somehow. If she just had the knowledge, the skills, the courage. "Okay," Riley heard herself say. "Okay, but we need to move you. Can you stand?" He nodded weakly. Riley knew it was probably a lie, but they had to try. She looked at the babies. "Are they yours?" "My children." Pride flickered in his eyes even through the pain. "Francesca and Matteo are coming too." Riley made the decision in that instant, understanding somewhere in the back of her mind that nothing in her life would be the same after this moment. She grabbed the first car seat. Francesca, she guessed based on the pink trim. And then Matteo's. They were heavier than she expected, solid and real in her hands. Setting them carefully aside where the rain couldn't reach, she returned to the man. "I'm going to help you stand. My truck is just 20 feet away. Can you make it?" He nodded again, and Riley slid her shoulder under his good arm, bracing herself against his weight. He was tall, easily 6 feet 2 inches or 63, and solidly built under the expensive suit that was now ruined with rain and worse. On 3, Riley counted. They rose together, his weight nearly buckling her knees. He bit back a groan. and Riley felt him trembling with the effort of staying upright. Step by agonizing step, they made their way toward the mouth of the alley where Riley's beat-up Ford pickup sat under a broken street lamp. "Wait here," she panted, propping him against the truck's side. She ran back for the babies, grabbing both car seats. Her arms burned with the effort, but adrenaline pushed her forward. The truck's passenger door squealed as she yanked it open. She secured one car seat in the back, then the other, her fingers fumbling with the seat belts. The babies had quieted to whimpers, their wide eyes watching her with that peculiar awareness infants sometimes have. "It's okay," Riley murmured to them, though she had no idea if that was true. "It's going to be okay." The man had slid down the side of the truck by the time she returned to him. Riley's heart hammered as she helped him into the passenger seat. His head fell back against the headrest. His breathing labored. "Stay with me," Riley said firmly, slamming the door and racing around to the driver's side. The engine coughed twice before turning over. Riley's hands white-knuckled the steering wheel as she pulled away from the diner, her eyes darting between the road and the man beside her. His name tag, she could see it now in the dim glow of the dashboard, read simply, a Romano. The suit, even ruined, was clearly expensive. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than Riley made in 6 months. His shoes were Italian leather. What had she gotten herself into? The drive to her apartment in Queens usually took 30 minutes. Riley made it in 18, running 2 red lights and pushing her truck to speeds that made the frame rattle. She kept talking the whole way, partly to keep him conscious and partly to keep herself from panicking. "I'm Riley, by the way. Riley Murphy. I live alone. Well, I guess not anymore. At least for tonight. My apartment's small, but it's clean. I have some medical supplies. I used to be in med school. Did I mention that? 2 years at NYU before I dropped out. My parents died. Car accident. And I couldn't. Anyway, I remember enough. I thank God. I hope I remember enough." The man, Romano, made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. In the back seat, one of the twins started crying again. A tired, frightened sound that made Riley's chest ache. "Almost there," she promised them all. Almost there. Her apartment building was a tired 4-story walk-up in Etoria, the kind of place where everyone minded their own business, and the landlord only fixed things when they became fire hazards. Riley parked as close to the entrance as possible and sat for a moment, her hands still gripping the wheel, reality crashing over her. She had just brought a wounded stranger and 2 babies to her home. She hadn't called the police. She had no idea what had happened to him, who he was running from, or why he was so desperate to avoid hospitals. Romano's hand touched her arm, making her jump. His eyes were open, clearer now, despite the pain etched in every line of his face. "Thank you," he said simply. Those 2 words, spoken with such genuine gratitude, steadied something in Riley. She nodded. "Let's get you inside." Getting him up 3 flights of stairs was a nightmare. Romano could barely stand, let alone climb. Both of them wearing wedding rings. Riley turned the photo over written in elegant script. "Alessandro Isabella, and our miracles 3 months to go." Isabella, the name he'd called out in his fever. Riley looked at the babies, understanding settling over her like a heavy coat. These were their children, and Isabella wasn't here. She tucked the photo back into the wallet and returned to her spot on the floor. The rain had finally stopped. Through her window, she could see the first hints of dawn lightening the sky over Queens. Riley pulled her knees to her chest and watched over her unexpected charges. Alessandro Romano, she had his name now, who was running from something terrible enough to risk dying in an alley rather than go to a hospital. And Francesca and Matteo, 2 innocent babies caught in whatever storm their father was facing. "I'll keep them safe," Riley promised the sleeping room. "Whatever this is, whoever you are, I'll keep them safe." Alessandro's hand twitched in his sleep, and somewhere in his fevered unconsciousness, he seemed to hear his breathing steadied slightly, the lines of pain on his face easing just a fraction. As dawn broke over New York City, Riley Murphy sat in her small apartment and wondered if she'd just saved a life or ruined her own. The twins slept on, unaware of the weight of their small existence, of the mysteries surrounding their father, of the danger that had driven them all into the rain-soaked alley behind Betty's diner. Riley thought about calling in sick to work. She thought about all the questions this would raise. She thought about the jacket hanging by her door, the one with Alessandro's gun in the pocket. She'd found it while going through his things, a cold reminder that this man was dangerous in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. But mostly she thought about the way he'd held on to those car seats, even while losing consciousness. The way he'd whispered, "My children," with such fierce love. The way his eyes had pleaded with her for help, not for himself, but for them. And she thought about her own parents and all the ways life could change in an instant. And how sometimes the right choice was the one that made no sense at all. "I hope you're worth it, Alessandro Romano," Riley whispered, finally allowing her eyes to close. "For their sake, I really hope you're worth it." The city hummed outside her window, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in one unremarkable apartment. Somewhere out there, people were looking for Alessandro Romano. Somewhere out there, danger was circling. But in that moment, in that quiet apartment, as morning arrived, there was only the soft breathing of two babies, the fevered sleep of a wounded man, and one exhausted waitress who had chosen compassion over safety and had no idea where that choice would lead. Riley's last thought before sleep claimed her was a memory from medical school. Something one of her professors had said during their ethics course. The Hippocratic Oath says, "First, do no harm." But sometimes doing no harm means taking a risk, making a choice that might be wrong because the alternative is definitely worse. She hadn't understood it then. She understood it now. Riley woke to the sound of crying. Not the desperate wails from the night before, but the insistent, hungry cries of babies who knew it was morning and wanted breakfast. Pale November sunlight filtered through her apartment's thin curtains, and for one blissful moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then her neck protested the awkward angle she'd slept in against the wall, and reality came flooding back. She pushed herself up, every muscle in her body screaming. The clock on the wall read 7:23 a.m. She'd slept maybe 3 hours, and it felt like 3 minutes. Matteo was the louder of the two, his face scrunched in red. Francesco whimpered beside him, building up to a full cry. Riley stumbled over to them, her body moving on autopilot. Okay, I hear you," she murmured, lifting Matteo first. He was warm and solid in her arms, his crying tapering off slightly at the contact. "I know, buddy. I know you're hungry." She glanced toward the couch. Alessandro Romano lay exactly as she'd left him, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The fever seemed to have broken. His face had more color than it had in the early morning hours, though he was still pale beneath his olive complexion. Riley managed to warm bottles with one hand while holding Matteo against her shoulder with the other. The apartment was cold. She'd forgotten to adjust the thermostat before everything happened. She made a mental note to turn up the heat once she had both babies fed. Francesca went first this time. Riley settled on the floor with her back against the couch, cradling the baby girl while Matteo waited in his car seat, his cries more insistent. "Your turn's coming, I promise," Riley told him. She was halfway through feeding Matteo when Alessandro stirred. His movement was subtle at first, a shift of his head, a flexing of his fingers. Then his eyes opened, unfocused and confused. Riley watched him blink several times, his gaze traveling across the unfamiliar ceiling, the strange walls before finally landing on her. Their eyes met, and Riley saw the exact moment full consciousness returned to him. His entire body tensed, and his hand moved, searching for something. The jacket, the weapon, coffee, Riley offered, moving to the kitchen area. "Please," she made a pot, the routine soothing in its familiarity. While it brewed, she checked on the twins, both still sleeping, their small faces peaceful. Matteo had his fist near his mouth. Francesca's hand curled around the edge of her blanket. "They'll wake up hungry in about 20 minutes, Alessandro said like clockwork. "I should feed them before I leave. I can manage." "Can you really? Because you could barely sit up yesterday." "I've been doing this for 8 months. I'll manage. With 2 good arms. With one arm barely functional and a healing shoulder injury." Riley poured 2 cups of coffee, bringing one to him. "Let me help before I go." The word please seemed to disarm him. Alessandro nodded, accepting the coffee with his good hand. "Thank you." They drank in silence for a few minutes, the apartment slowly lightening with the approaching dawn. Riley could hear her neighbors starting their days. Chin's television turning on, footsteps from the apartment above. "What time do you need to be at work?" Alessandro asked. "But I should leave by 6:30 to catch the bus." Riley checked her phone, which gives us about 45 minutes. As if on cue, Mateo started fussing. Riley moved immediately, lifting him gently. "Good morning, troublemaker," she murmured, checking his diaper. "Let's get you changed and fed." Yeah, she'd gotten better at this. The diaper change was quick, efficient. Mateo watched her with his dark eyes, so like his father's. And Riley found herself smiling despite everything. "You're a natural," Alessandro observed, watching her warm the bottles. "I'm learning." Riley settled into the armchair with Mateo, offering him the bottle. He latched on eagerly, his small hands gripping it. "There's a difference." Francesco awoke next, and Alessandro attempted to lift her with his good arm. Riley saw the pain flash across his face, quickly suppressed. "Let me," Riley said. "Finish your coffee. I'll feed her, too." "Riley, Alessandro, please. It's faster this way, and I need to leave soon." She met his eyes. "Let me help." He relented, leaning back against the cushions. Riley could see the frustration in every line of his body. A man used to being capable, now forced to accept assistance. Feeding both twins took coordination. Riley was still developing, but she managed. Mateo finished first, and she switched him to her shoulder for burping while Francesca continued eating. The domestic scene felt surreal. 3 days ago, Riley's biggest concern had been paying her electric bill on time. "There are 4 bottles already prepared in the bag," Riley said as she burped. "Mateo, you just need to warm them. Feed them every 3 to 4 hours. If they seem fussier than usual, they might be teething. There are rings you can refrigerate in the freezer." "I know," Alessandro said quietly. "But thank you." Riley got both babies changed and settled, then gathered her things. Keys, phone, wallet. At the door, she paused, turning back to look at the scene. Alessandro on her couch, 2 babies in their car seats nearby. All of them dependent on her silence, her discretion, her ability to act normal. "I'll be back by 3, Riley said. "My shift ends at 2:30, but I'll stop at the store for supplies. We need more diapers, formula, and actual food. What do you want?" "Whatever you think is appropriate. There's cash in my wallet." "I have money, Riley." Alessandro's voice was firm. "Use my money, please." She wanted to argue, but didn't have time. "Stay away from the windows. Don't answer the door. If something happens, nothing will happen. We'll be here when you return." Riley wanted to believe him. She left the apartment, locking all 3 locks behind her, and stood in the hallway for a moment, steadying herself. Then she descended the stairs and stepped out into the cold November morning. The bus ride to Brooklyn felt eternal. Riley kept her head down, avoiding eye contact, trying not to think about the men from last night or the fact that she was now actively lying to everyone she knew. When her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Marissa, "Coffee this week." Riley stared at it for a long moment before typing back, "Crazy busy with work." Soon, though, another lie. They were piling up. Betty's diner looked exactly as it always did. Neon sign buzzing, windows steamed from the breakfast rush inside. Riley tied her apron on in the back room, checked her reflection one more time, and pushed through the kitchen doors with a smile she didn't feel. "Riley, you're alive," Betty called from behind the counter. "Feeling better." "Much better, thanks." The lie came easily now. "Just needed rest." "Good, because we're slammed. Table 3 needs refills, and Table 7's been waiting 10 minutes for their order." Riley fell into the rhythm of work, pouring coffee, taking orders, delivering plates, smiling at customers. The familiar routine should have been comforting, but instead she felt like she was playing a part in a play, watching herself from outside her own body. During her break, Riley sat in the back alley, not near the dumpsters where she'd found Alessandro, but close enough that she kept glancing that direction, half expecting to see blood still staining the pavement. But 3 days of rain had washed everything away. "The photo in your wallet, Isabella." Alessandro's entire body went rigid. "You went through my things. I needed to know who you were. If you had family, I should call emergency contacts. Anything." Riley met his glare steadily. "She's beautiful. Was beautiful." The past tense hung in the air between them. Alessandro's jaw worked for a moment before he answered. "Isabella died 8 months ago. Complications during the birth." "I'm sorry." And Riley was genuinely. She'd seen that photo, the love in it, the anticipation. She never got to see them grow. She held them once for 20 minutes. Alessandro's voice had gone hollow. "The doctor said she was stable, that the complications were under control. Then her heart just stopped. Riley didn't push. She'd learned in her brief medical training that grief needed space, not prodding. They sat in silence for several minutes, drinking coffee, each lost in their own thoughts. Francesca woke up making small sounds that weren't quite crying. Riley retrieved her from the car seat and settled her in her lap, supporting the baby's head the way she'd figured out through trial and error. "You're good with them," Alessandro observed. "I'm faking it," Riley admitted. "I've never been around babies, but they're easier than I expected. More resilient. They've had to be." Bitterness crept into Alessandro's tone. "The last 8 months have been chaos. Isabella's parents blamed me for her passing. They tried to take the twins, claimed I was unfit. Then there were business complications." "Business?" Riley seized on the word. "What kind of business requires you to run through Brooklyn at night with your children afraid of hospitals?" Alessandro's expression shuddered. "The kind that's better not discussed." Riley's voice hardened. "You don't get to do that. I saved your life. I'm harboring you in my home. I'm caring for your children. You owe me the truth. You want the truth." Alessandro shifted carefully, wincing at the movement. "The truth could put you in more danger than you're already in. I think finding you in an alley with a shoulder injury already put me in danger, don't you?" They stared at each other, neither backing down. Matteo stirred between them, making a small sound. The tension broke as Alessandro automatically adjusted to soothe his son, his expression softening. "I'm an import and export." Alessandro finally said, "That's not an answer. It's the safest answer I can give you." Riley wanted to push, but something in his eyes stopped her. Fear, not for himself, but for her. She recognized it because she'd seen it in her father's eyes when he'd made her promise to leave the accident scene and get help, even though it meant leaving him alone. "Fine," Riley said, "but I need to know one thing. Are we safe here right now in this apartment?" Alessandro hesitated, and that hesitation told Riley everything she needed to know. "How long do we have?" she asked. "I don't know. A day, maybe 2. They'll be looking for me, but they won't expect me to stay in the city. Most people would run. Why didn't you? Matteo especially. He hates being alone." Riley picked up the baby, cradling him close. He settled immediately, his cries fading to hiccups. She swayed gently, humming without thinking, some melody her mother used to sing. When she looked up, Alessandro was watching her again with that unreadable expression. "Nothing. Just thank you. You've already thanked me. I'll probably thank you 100 more times before this is over." Riley wanted to ask when over would be, but she was afraid of the answer. The evening settled into routine. Riley fed the twins again, changed them, got them ready for sleep. Alessandro dozed intermittently, his body still fighting to recover. Riley made herself a sandwich and ate standing up at the kitchen counter, too wired to sit. She was cleaning up when she heard it. A sound from the hallway outside her door. Footsteps slow and deliberate, stopping at each apartment. She looked at Alessandro, who was suddenly alert, his entire body tense. "Turn off the lights," he whispered. Riley moved quickly, flipping switches. The apartment plunged into darkness. Only the glow from the street lamps outside providing any illumination. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Riley's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She stood in the middle of the apartment, equidistant from Alessandro and the twins. Unsure what to do. A knock. 3 sharp raps against the door. Alessandro shook his head minutely. "Don't answer." Another knock. Then a voice. Casual. "Building maintenance, checking the radiators." It was 9 p.m. on a Saturday. No building maintenance worked these hours, especially not in her neglected apartment building. Riley held her breath. The twins miraculously stayed quiet. The door knob rattled. Someone was testing it, seeing if it was locked. Riley thanked every guardian angel she had that she'd engaged both the deadbolt and chain. More footsteps. A second voice lower. "Wrong apartment." "You sure?" "I'm sure." "Let's go." The footsteps retreated. Riley waited, counting to 100 before she dared to move. She crept to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain, and looked down at the street below. 2 men emerged from the building. Both wore dark clothes. Both moved with the confident stride of people who weren't afraid of anything. They climbed into a black SUV parked across the street and drove away. Riley turned to find Alessandro attempting to sit up, his face white with pain and effort. "They were looking for me," he said. "How did they find this building?" "They didn't. They're canvassing the neighborhood, checking buildings near where I disappeared." They'll work their way outward from that alley until they find something. Alessandro managed to get himself more upright, breathing hard from the effort. We can't stay here. You can barely move. How are you planning to leave? I don't have a choice. If they come back, we don't answer the door again. They have no reason to suspect this specific apartment. I'm not on anyone's radar. We act normal. If you go to work tomorrow like usual, if nothing changes in your routine, they have no reason to suspect this apartment. Riley's heart hammered. And if they decide to search anyway, then we deal with it. The SUV sat there for another 20 minutes before finally pulling away. Riley watched it disappear around the corner, then closed the curtain completely. They're gone, she said. For now. Alessandro had managed to sit more upright despite her protests. Riley, you should know if they come here. If they find me, you need to act like you didn't know, like I forced you to help me. I'm not doing that. It's the only way to keep you safe. I said no. Riley's voice was firm. We're in this together. I'm not throwing you under to save myself. That's exactly what you should do. Well, I won't. Riley moved closer, her frustration boiling over. Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. Stop acting like I don't get to make my own choices about my own safety. I'm a grown woman, Alessandro, and I decided to help you. That means all of it. The risk, the danger, everything. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. The tension in the room had shifted into something else. Something electric and dangerous. You're impossible, Alessandro said finally. Right back at you. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the absurdity of their situation, Riley found herself fighting a smile. Alessandro seemed to be having the same problem, the corners of his mouth twitching. We're quite a pair, he said. A waitress and a mob boss. It's like a bad movie. Isabella used to love bad movies. She'd make me watch them with her, insisting they were so bad they're good. Alessandro's expression softened at the memory. I complained every time, but I'd have watched anything if it meant seeing her smile. You loved her very much. Alessandro looked at his sleeping children. She gave me everything. Love, family, hope that I could be better than what I was born into. And then she was gone, and I was left trying to figure out how to be everything she was for these two. Riley sat on the arm of the couch, closer to Alessandro than she'd been since that first night. You're doing better than you think. Those babies are loved and cared for. That's what matters. With your help, I couldn't have done this without you. Would have found a way. You're stubborn enough, says the woman who won't let me protect her by taking the blame if we're caught. They were close now. Close enough that Riley could see the flecks of gold in Alessandro's dark eyes, the faint scar on his jaw, the weariness that went deeper than physical injury. And Alessandro was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Riley, he said softly. Don't. Riley stood abruptly, moving away. Whatever you're about to say, don't. You don't know what I was going to say. I can guess. And it's a bad idea. Riley wrapped her arms around herself. You're vulnerable, injured, grateful for help. I'm lonely and looking for purpose. That's not we can't what. Can't confuse this situation for something it's not. Riley forced herself to meet his eyes. In a few days or weeks, you'll be healed. You'll leave, take your children somewhere safe, return to your life, and I'll go back to mine. That's how this has to end. And if I don't want it to end that way, then you're not thinking clearly. But Riley's voice lacked conviction. Alessandro held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're probably right. I know I'm right. But neither of them sounded convinced. The rest of the evening passed in careful politeness, both of them avoiding the elephant in the room. Riley prepared for bed. Alessandro settled on the couch. The twins slept peacefully. Everything normal, everything fine. Except nothing was fine, and they both knew it. As Riley lay on her makeshift floor bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Alessandro had looked at her. The way she'd wanted to lean closer instead of pulling away. This was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with men in SUVs or organized crime. This was the kind of danger that started in your chest and spread until it consumed everything. And Riley had absolutely no idea how to protect herself from it. From the couch, Alessandro's voice came softly through the darkness. Yeah, thank you for everything. You already thanked me. I know, but I needed to say it again. Riley closed her eyes, fighting against the warmth spreading through her chest. Get some sleep, Alessandro. You too. But neither of them slept much that night. They lay in the darkness of that small apartment. Two people who had found each other in impossible circumstances, trying to ignore the connection growing between them. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere people were looking for Alessandro Romano. But in apartment 3C, there was only the sound of breathing, the soft presence of sleeping babies, and two hearts beating in careful synchronization. Whether they wanted to admit it or not. 2 weeks passed in careful routine. Alessandro healed steadily, his shoulder regaining strength. Riley continued working at Betty's, maintaining normality while her heart remained in apartment 3C with the man and babies who had changed everything. Late one evening, Alessandro's phone finally rang. Dominic, his most trusted second in command. "Boss, we found the traitor. It's handled. You're safe now." Alessandro exhaled relief he'd been holding for weeks. "Arrangements ready when you are. Safe house in Connecticut. Clean identities for transition." Riley overheard from the kitchen, her stomach dropping. This was it. The moment she'd known was coming. That night, after the twins slept, Alessandro found Riley staring out the window. "I have to leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "I know." Riley's voice was steady despite her breaking heart. "Come with us." She turned, shocked. "Come with us. Help me raise them. Be part of our lives." Alessandro moved closer. "These past weeks, I haven't felt this alive since Isabella. The twins need you. I need you." "Alessandro, I can't just why not? What's keeping you here? Dead-end job, student debt, or maybe..." He touched her face gently. "Maybe you're scared of wanting something real." Riley's eyes filled with tears. "This is insane, I know, but the best things usually are." She looked at the sleeping twins, then back at Alessandro. Her parents had taught her that love meant taking risks, that playing it safe wasn't really living. "Okay," Riley whispered. "Okay, yes." Alessandro kissed her then, soft, promising, full of hope for an unlikely future. Riley pushed the stroller through their Connecticut neighborhood. Francesca and Matteo babbling happily. Alessandro walked beside her, his arm around her waist. The past finally loosening its grip. She'd re-enrolled in medical school online. He'd stepped back from active leadership, consulting remotely while focusing on family. It wasn't perfect. Danger still lingered at the edges. But they were building something real. A family forged in impossible circumstances. No regrets. Alessandro asked, watching her smile at his children. Riley thought of that rainy night in Brooklyn. The choice that changed everything. Not a single one. Some love stories began in darkness, but they could still find their way to light. 6 months had passed since that rainy October night in Brooklyn, and Riley Murphy was discovering that new beginnings came with their own complications. The Connecticut safe house had become home. A sprawling colonial on 3 acres of wooded land where Francesca and Matteo could grow up safely, where Alessandro could slowly disentangle himself from the world that had nearly killed him, and where Riley could pursue her dreams of becoming a doctor while building the family she'd never expected to find. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Riley prepared bottles for the twins, now 14 months old and impossibly more demanding than when she'd first found them crying in that Brooklyn alley. Matteo had learned to walk 2 weeks ago and was currently using his newfound mobility to terrorize the household cat, while Francesca sat in her high chair systematically dropping Cheerios on the floor and giggling at the resulting mess. Alessandro entered the kitchen carrying his laptop and the expression he wore when dealing with his former associates. Even in Connecticut, even with Dominic handling most of the day-to-day operations, there were still calls to take, decisions to approve, loose ends to tie up. The transition away from active leadership was proving more complicated than either of them had anticipated. "We have a problem," Alessandro said without preamble, setting the laptop on the counter. Riley looked up from warming bottles, her stomach immediately tightening. Over the past 6 months, she'd learned to read his moods, to distinguish between minor business irritations and genuine threats. This was the latter. "What kind of problem?" she asked, lifting Matteo before he could pull the cat's tail again. "The kind that might require us to move again." Alessandro's jaw was tight, the way it got when he was trying to protect her from information he thought might frighten her. 2 of our warehouses in New Jersey were hit last night. Professional job, coordinated. Someone's making a move. Riley settled Matteo in his playpen and turned to face Alessandro fully. "Who would do that? And why now? You've been out of the active business for months." "That's exactly why now." Alessandro pulled up a map on his laptop screen, pointing to red X marks scattered across northern New Jersey. Some of the other families see my stepping back as weakness. They're testing boundaries, seeing what they can take while Dominic's in charge, and I'm playing house in Connecticut. The phrase playing house stung more than it should have. Riley knew Alessandro hadn't meant it as a dismissal of their life together, but the implication that their family was somehow less real, less important than his business obligations, touched a nerve she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "So what does this mean for us?" Riley asked. "Do we pack up and disappear again? Find another safe house, another identity?" Alessandro closed the laptop and reached for her, but she stepped back, suddenly needing space to think. His hand dropped to his side. "It means I need to go back to New York for a few days. Show strength. Remind everyone why challenging the Romano family is a bad idea. Handle this personally before it escalates into something that could reach Connecticut." Riley felt the familiar chill of fear, the same sensation she'd experienced in her apartment when men with guns had come looking for Alessandro. "You said you were out. You said Dominic was handling things." "I am out. But there are some situations that require the boss himself, not his lieutenant. This is one of them." Alessandro's voice was gentle but firm, the tone he used when he'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed from it. "I'll be back in 3 days, maybe 4. You and the twins will be safe here. The security system is state-of-the-art, and I'll leave 2 guards on the property." "Guards?" Riley repeated the word slowly, testing how it felt in her mouth. "Like prison guards." Alessandro's expression tightened. "Like protection. There's a difference." "Is there?" Riley moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful Connecticut neighborhood where children rode bicycles and neighbors walked dogs, and no one needed armed guards watching their houses. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we're right back where we started. You running toward danger, me sitting somewhere safe, waiting to see if you come home." "That's not fair," Alessandro said. "This is different. This is me cleaning up loose and so we can have a real future together." Riley turned back to him, and he saw something in her expression that made him pause. "6 months ago, you promised me we were leaving this behind. You promised the twins would grow up safe, that we'd build something normal together. Now you're telling me you need to go back to New York to remind people why they should be afraid of you. They should be afraid of me." Alessandro's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "That fear is what keeps you safe. What keeps Francesca and Matteo safe. What keeps this peaceful Connecticut life possible. You think our neighbors don't wonder why a man my age doesn't have a visible job but can afford a house like this. You think the school district won't ask questions when we try to enroll the twins using identities that are only 6 months old." Riley had wondered about those things, had lain awake some nights thinking about all the ways their carefully constructed new life might unravel. But she'd pushed those thoughts aside, choosing to focus on the immediate joys of watching the twins grow, of studying for her medical school entrance exams, of playing house with the man she'd fallen in love with in impossible circumstances. "So what's the solution?" she asked. "You go back to being a full-time crime boss. We move every few months when someone new decides to challenge you. The twins grow up with bodyguards and bulletproof cars and the knowledge that their father hurts people for a living." Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, watching Francesca throw another handful of Cheerios on the floor. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. "I don't know. I thought stepping back would be enough. I thought if I removed myself from day-to-day operations, eventually the business would stabilize without me and I could walk away completely. But it's more complicated than that. Maybe it's time to make it less complicated." Riley's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "Maybe it's time to actually walk away. Sell everything to Dominic or another family. Take whatever money you can get and start over somewhere new with clean identities and no connections to any of this. You don't understand what you're asking." Alessandro's tone was sharp now, defensive. "I can't just sell a crime family like a legitimate business. There are territories, agreements, debts, loyalties that go back generations. You walk away wrong, you end up dead. Your family ends up dead. Then maybe you should have thought about that before asking me to give up everything and come with you." Riley's anger was building now, 6 months of suppressed doubts and fears finally finding their voice. "Maybe you should have thought about what it would mean to ask someone to love you and your children while keeping one foot in a world that could destroy all of us." The kitchen fell silent except for the twins babbling to themselves and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Alessandro stared at Riley, and she could see him weighing his words, calculating how much truth their relationship could bear. "You're right," he said finally. "I asked you to trust me with your whole life, and I haven't been completely honest about what that would mean. The truth is, I don't know how to get out cleanly. I've been in this world since I was 16 years old. It's all I know. Every skill I have, every connection, every dollar in our bank account comes from illegal activities. I don't know how to be anything else." Riley felt her anger deflate, replaced by something that might have been pity. That might have been love. She moved closer to Alessandro, studying his face in the morning light. He looked older than his 35 years, worn down by responsibilities and violence, and the weight of choices made long before he'd met her. "Learn," she said simply. "Learn how to be something else." Alessandro blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "What? Learn how to be something else? You're brilliant, Alessandro. You managed a criminal organization worth millions of dollars. You negotiated treaties between violent men who've been enemies for decades. You built a network that spans 3 states. Those are transferable skills. To what? Legitimate business. Consulting. Security. I don't know exactly what, but there are options if you're willing to explore them." Riley reached for his hands, and this time he didn't pull away. "The first step is deciding you actually want out. Not just stepping back when it's convenient, but genuinely wanting a different life." Alessandro was quiet for several minutes, his eyes moving between Riley's face and the twins playing nearby. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I want out, but I don't know how to protect all of you if I'm nobody. If I'm just another ex-criminal trying to go straight. You won't be nobody." Riley's voice was fierce now, certain. "You'll be Matteo and Francesca's father. You'll be my partner. You'll be someone who chose love over fear, family over power. That's not nothing. That's everything." Alessandro pulled her closer, and Riley could feel the tension in his body, the weight of a decision that would change everything. "What if I can't do it? What if I try to get out, and it gets us all killed? Then at least we'll have tried. At least the twins will know their father died trying to give them a better life, instead of perpetuating the cycle that trapped him." They stood together in the kitchen, holding each other while Francesca and Matteo played at their feet, and Riley could feel the moment when Alessandro made his choice. She felt it in the way his breathing changed, in the slight relaxation of his shoulders, in the quality of his grip on her hands. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's figure out how to get out. But first, I need to handle this situation in New Jersey. I need to show strength one last time, establish enough fear and respect that people will leave us alone while we make our transition." Riley wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he could handle the New Jersey problem from Connecticut, over the phone, through intermediaries. But she recognized the truth in what he was saying. In the criminal world he'd inhabited for 20 years, perception was reality. If he appeared weak now, every ambitious lieutenant and rival family would see an opportunity. 3 days, she said. "Handle whatever you need to handle in 3 days. Then come home, and we start planning our exit strategy." Alessandro nodded, relief evident on his face. 3 days. "And Riley, when I come back, we're done with all of this. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to sacrifice, we're out." That afternoon, Riley watched from the front window as Alessandro's black SUV disappeared down their tree-lined street, heading toward the highway that would take him back to New York and the violent world they'd been trying to escape. The house felt too quiet without him, despite the constant chatter and motion of the twins. She'd given the guards the afternoon off, needing space to think without the constant reminder of the dangers that still surrounded them. The security system was armed, motion sensors covering every approach to the house. But Riley found herself jumping at every sound, every car that passed on the road, every branch that scraped against the windows in the autumn wind. By evening, loneliness had settled over her like a heavy blanket. The twins were in bed, the house was secured, and Riley sat in the living room with her medical school textbooks, trying to focus on anatomy diagrams while her mind wandered to Alessandro. Was he safe? Had he reached New York? Was he already in meetings with dangerous men who might see killing him as a solution to their territorial disputes? Her phone rang just after 9, Alessandro's name appearing on the screen. Relief flooded through her as she answered. "How are things there?" she asked without preamble. "Complicated." Alessandro's voice was tired, strained. "The situation is worse than Dominic initially reported. It's not just territorial encroachment. Someone's been systematically targeting our operations, our people. This feels coordinated, planned. Planned by who? I'm not sure yet. But Riley, I need you to listen to me carefully. Pack bags for you and the twins. Enough for a week, maybe 2. Keep them ready by the front door. If I call and tell you to leave, don't ask questions. Just take the twins and drive to the cabin in Vermont. Do you remember how to get there? Riley's blood went cold. Alessandro had shown her the Vermont property months ago, a remote hunting lodge that served as a final backup plan, somewhere they could disappear completely if everything else failed. She'd hoped they'd never need it. I remember, she said. Alessandro, what aren't you telling me? What's happening? I think someone's been watching us. All of us. Our house. Our routines. The twins' daycare. This isn't just about business territories. This is personal. The line went quiet except for the sound of traffic in the background. Riley could picture Alessandro standing on some New York street corner, weighing how much truth she could handle, how much fear was reasonable versus how much would send her into panic. Who would want to hurt us personally? She asked. Isabella's family. Alessandro's voice was flat, emotionless. Her parents. They blamed me for her death, tried to take custody of the twins before we disappeared. They have connections, resources. They might have hired someone to find us. Riley sank onto the couch, her textbook sliding to the floor. Isabella's parents had seemed like grieving grandparents when Alessandro had described them months ago. She'd never considered them a threat. What do they want? The twins. Alessandro's answer was immediate, certain. They want custody of Francesca and Matteo. They believe the children belong with them, not with the man they hold responsible for their daughter's death. And if they can't get custody legally, they might try other methods. Riley looked toward the stairs, thinking of the twins sleeping peacefully in their cribs, unaware that their grandfather and grandmother might be plotting to take them away from the only family they'd known since birth. Come home, she said. Alessandro, just come home. We'll figure this out together. I can't. Not yet. If I leave now, if I show weakness, everything will fall apart. But I can't focus on business knowing you and the twins might be in danger. I need to know you're safe. We're safe. The security system is top of the line. The guards are back on duty. The neighbors would call the police if they saw anything suspicious. Riley was trying to convince herself as much as Alessandro, but her voice lacked conviction. Riley. Alessandro's tone was serious, urgent. Promise me something. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you take the twins and you run. Don't wait for confirmation. Don't try to investigate. Don't call me first. Just go. I promise, Riley said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. She'd never been the type to run from problems, but she was learning that sometimes running was the smartest strategy available. They talked for another few minutes about mundane things, the twins' eating schedules, Riley's upcoming medical school interview, the weather forecast for the week. Normal conversation that felt surreal given the circumstances. When they hung up, Riley sat in the silent living room and tried to process the fact that her peaceful Connecticut life might be built on quicksand. The next morning brought gray clouds and a steady drizzle that matched Riley's mood. The twins were fussy, picking up on her anxiety in the way children do, demanding extra attention and comfort. Riley went through the motions of their routine, breakfast and playtime and story hour, but her attention kept drifting to the windows, to every car that passed on the street, to every sound from outside. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Riley froze, a spoonful of baby food halfway to Francesca's mouth. They weren't expecting anyone. The grocery delivery wasn't scheduled until Thursday. The guards were stationed at the end of the driveway and would have called if they'd cleared anyone to approach the house. The bell rang again, followed by a woman's voice calling through the door. Excuse me, hello. I'm looking for Riley Murphy. I think there's been a mistake with mail delivery. Riley's heart hammered as she set down the baby food and moved to the window, staying hidden behind the curtain. A middle-aged woman stood on the front porch, wearing a beige coat and carrying what looked like a package. She appeared harmless enough, but Alessandro's warnings echoed in Riley's mind. She decided not to answer the door. Mail mistakes could be resolved later, when Alessandro was home, when she had backup. But as she watched, the woman moved off the porch and began walking around the side of the house, toward the backyard. Riley grabbed her phone and dialed the security company. This is Riley Murphy at 247 Maple Ridge Road. There's someone on my property who isn't supposed to be here. Can you send someone immediately? Ma'am, our records show your guards are on duty. Have you contacted them? Riley looked out toward the driveway where the guard booth stood. It appeared empty. A chill ran down her spine as she realized she hadn't seen either guard all morning. The guards aren't at their post, she said, her voice tight with growing panic. I need local police backup now. We're dispatching units immediately, ma'am. I recommend you secure yourself in an interior room until they arrive. Riley hung up and ran to the twins, lifting them both from their high chairs despite their protests. Francesca began crying, sensing her mother's fear, which set off Matteo in sympathetic tears. Riley carried them both upstairs to the master bedroom, her phone clutched in one hand, her mind racing through Alessandro's instructions. Pack bags. Take the twins. Drive to Vermont. Don't ask questions. But she hadn't packed bags yet, hadn't prepared for this possibility despite Alessandro's warnings. And now there might not be time. She could hear footsteps on the back patio, the sound of someone testing the sliding door handle. Riley set the twins on the bed and grabbed her purse, checking for her wallet, keys, phone charger. The essentials. Everything else would have to be left behind. She heard glass breaking somewhere downstairs, the distinct sound of someone forcing entry. Police were coming, but they might not arrive in time. The twins were crying louder now, and Riley knew the sound would give away their location to anyone searching the house. She needed to get them out immediately. She wrapped Francesca and Matteo in blankets and carried them toward the bedroom window that faced the backyard. The window was too high for escape, but it gave her a view of the approaches to the house. She could see two figures moving across the lawn, both wearing dark clothing, both carrying what looked like weapons. Not Isabella's parents. Professional kidnappers, maybe. Or worse. Riley's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We have your guards. Come downstairs with the children and no one gets hurt. You have 2 minutes. Terror flooded through her, but it was mixed with something else. Rage. These people, whoever they were, had threatened her family, had come into her home, the space where Francesca and Matteo were supposed to be safe, and turned it into a trap. She thought about Alessandro's gun, locked in the safe downstairs. Thought about the self-defense classes she'd taken in college. Thought about her promise to keep the twins safe no matter what it cost. But she also thought about Alessandro's voice on the phone the night before. Run. Don't investigate. Don't try to fight. Just get out. The bedroom had a second window that faced the front of the house. Riley moved to it, still carrying both twins, and looked down at the street. No police cars yet, but she could hear sirens in the distance. Alessandro's SUV was still in the driveway, the spare vehicle he'd left for emergencies. The twins had gone quiet, either exhausted from crying or sensing that silence was now critical for survival. Riley kissed both their heads and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. It's going to be okay. Mama's going to keep you safe. She heard footsteps on the main staircase now, someone coming up toward the bedrooms. Riley grabbed the car keys from her purse and moved to the bedroom door, listening for movement in the hallway. A man's voice, calm and professional. Mrs. Romano. We're not here to hurt anyone. We just need to talk. We know you're upstairs with the children. Mrs. Romano, not Mrs. Murphy, which meant they knew exactly who she was, who Alessandro was, what they'd been hiding from. Isabella's parents had found them after all. Riley heard police sirens getting closer, maybe 2 minutes away. If she could stall long enough, if she could keep the twins quiet long enough, help might arrive before anyone got hurt. I'm not coming downstairs, she called through the door. The police are already on their way. You should leave now while you still can. Mrs. Romano, we're not criminals. We're private investigators hired by Isabella's family. They just want to meet their grandchildren. No one needs to get hurt. Riley felt a flicker of doubt. Could this be a legitimate custody issue rather than a kidnapping? But Alessandro's warnings rang in her memory, and she remembered his fear when he'd mentioned Isabella's parents. If they'd wanted a legal meeting, they could have arranged it through lawyers. Breaking into her house, threatening her guards, wasn't the action of people seeking peaceful resolution. The sirens were louder now, very close. Riley heard cursing from downstairs, the sound of people moving quickly toward exits. Car doors slamming. Engine starting. When the police arrived 3 minutes later, they found an empty house except for Riley and the twins barricaded in the master bedroom. The guards were discovered tied up, but unharmed in a shed behind the property. The intruders had vanished, leaving behind only broken glass and the terrifying knowledge that Alessandro's enemies had found them in Connecticut. Riley sat in the kitchen giving her statement to the police, while Francesca and Matteo played at her feet, blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to being taken. Her hands shook as she held her coffee cup, adrenaline still coursing through her system hours after the danger had passed. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his tone gentle but serious. "We've reviewed the security footage. These weren't random burglars. They knew the layout of your property, disabled your security system professionally, and came prepared for exactly what they found. This was targeted." Riley nodded, unsurprised. She'd already called Alessandro, left voicemails explaining what had happened, begging him to come home immediately. But his phone was going straight to voicemail, and she didn't know if that meant he was in meetings, in danger, or simply out of cell range. "Do you have somewhere else you can stay tonight?" the officer asked. "Family, friends. We'll increase patrols in this area, but given the professional nature of this intrusion, you might be safer elsewhere." Riley thought about the Vermont cabin, about Alessandro's instructions to run if anything felt wrong. Everything felt wrong now. Their safe house had been compromised, their guards had been overpowered, and someone was actively hunting for the twins. "Yes," she said, "I have somewhere to go." That night, Riley drove through the darkness toward Vermont with both twins sleeping in the back seat and everything she could carry stuffed into 2 suitcases. She'd left a note for Alessandro explaining where she was going and why, but she hadn't waited for his return from New York. Waiting felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. The cabin was exactly as she remembered it, a rustic structure on 50 acres of wilderness, accessible only by a winding dirt road that would show tire tracks if anyone tried to follow. Alessandro had stocked it with supplies months ago, enough food and essentials for several weeks, along with communications equipment and weapons Riley hoped she'd never need to use. She settled the twins in the cabin's single bedroom and tried to call Alessandro again. Still no answer. Fear gnawed at her as she considered the possibilities. Was he hurt? Had the same people who'd found her in Connecticut also found him in New York? Or was he simply busy cleaning up the mess that had forced him back into his old world? Riley spent the night awake, listening to every sound from the forest around the cabin, checking and rechecking the locks on the doors, the batteries in the security system, the magazine in the pistol Alessandro had taught her to use. She'd never felt so alone, so responsible for keeping 2 innocent lives safe in circumstances she didn't fully understand. Morning brought no answers, only more questions. Alessandro's phone was still going to voicemail. The news reports from New York mentioned increased police activity in several neighborhoods associated with organized crime, but no specific incidents, no arrests, no bodies. Either everything was fine, or everything was being kept very quiet. Around noon, Riley heard the sound of a vehicle coming up the dirt road. She grabbed the pistol and moved to the window, twins safely behind her in the bedroom, heart hammering as she tried to identify the approaching car. Alessandro's SUV came into view, and relief flooded through her so intensely she nearly dropped the gun. But relief turned to concern when she saw him get out of the driver's seat. His left arm was in a sling, there was a bandage on his temple, and he moved like someone fighting through significant pain. Riley set down the weapon and ran outside, throwing herself into his good arm while trying not to jar his injuries. "What happened? Are you okay? Where have you been? I've been calling for hours." Alessandro held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "I'm so sorry. My phone was destroyed when things went sideways yesterday. I've been in a hospital, then driving straight here as soon as the doctors would release me. Are you and the twins okay? Tell me exactly what happened." They sat on the cabin's front porch while the twins napped inside, and Riley recounted every detail of the break-in, the threatening text message, the professional efficiency of the intruders. Alessandro listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "It wasn't Isabella's parents," he said when she finished. "This was a distraction. Someone used the threat against you and the twins to pull me back to New York, to get me away from Connecticut where I could protect you." A distraction from what? From a coordinated attack on our entire operation. While I was dealing with the warehouse hits, while you were being threatened in Connecticut, someone hit 6 more of our businesses. Banks' accounts were frozen, computers were seized, key people disappeared. Alessandro's good hand clenched into a fist. Someone's been planning this for months. They know our organization inside and out. Riley felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. An inside job. It has to be. But Riley, that's not the worst part. The worst part is that they succeeded. As of yesterday, the Romano family effectively no longer exists. Our money, our territory, our people, everything's been absorbed by rivals or seized by law enforcement. We're out of the game whether we wanted to be or not. Riley stared at him, trying to process what this meant. You're saying we're free. We don't have to plan an exit strategy because the business is already gone. Alessandro's laugh was bitter, exhausted. We're free of the business, yes. But we're also broke, hunted, and homeless. The Connecticut house was purchased through shell companies that are now under investigation. Our bank accounts were frozen. Our identification documents are compromised. We're starting over with nothing. We're starting over with each other. Riley's voice was firm, certain. With Francesca and Matteo, with our health, with our freedom. That's not nothing. That's everything. Alessandro looked at her like she was something miraculous, something he couldn't quite believe was real. How can you be optimistic about this? We've lost everything. We're sitting in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with maybe $10,000 in cash and no legal way to earn more. The twins need stability, education, healthcare. I don't know how to provide any of that without my organization. The same way millions of other parents provide it. Riley moved closer to him on the porch swing, careful not to jar his injured arm. We work. We build something legitimate. We use the skills and intelligence that made you successful in a legal business to succeed in legal business. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast, but it's possible. Alessandro was quiet for a long time, watching the sun filter through the trees around the cabin. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, considering possibilities rather than dwelling on losses. I have contacts in private security. Legitimate companies that provide protection for executives, celebrities, people who need expertise but don't want to ask questions about where that expertise came from. It's not organized crime, but it's not completely removed from that world either. It's a start, Riley said, and I can finish my medical degree. It'll take longer now that we're starting over financially, but I can work while I study, contribute to supporting the family while building toward a career. The family. Alessandro repeated the words slowly, as if testing how they sounded. 3 days ago, I was a crime boss with territories and soldiers and the power to order people killed. Today, I'm an unemployed single father with 2 toddlers and a girlfriend who's willing to work minimum wage jobs to help support us. Which version of you is happier? Riley asked. Alessandro considered the question seriously, looking through the cabin's open door at Francesca and Matteo, now awake and babbling to each other in their makeshift playpen. This version, he said finally. Definitely this version. Even with the uncertainty, even with the financial stress, even with the very real possibility that we'll struggle for years to build something stable. This version gets to wake up every morning knowing that the people I love are safe because of choices I made, not despite them. Riley leaned against his good shoulder, watching their children play in the afternoon light streaming through the cabin windows. Outside, the Vermont wilderness stretched endlessly in all directions, a world away from Brooklyn alleys and Connecticut safe houses and the violent empire Alessandro had inherited and finally, completely, left behind. We'll make it work, she said. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we'll build something good together. Alessandro's response was quiet but certain, the voice of a man who'd found something worth more than power, more than money, more than the respect that came from fear. I know we will. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not running towards something or away from something. I'm exactly where I want to be. The sun set over the Vermont mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and in a small cabin surrounded by wilderness, a former crime boss and a former waitress planned their future, while 2 children who would grow up free played at their feet. Some love stories began in darkness, but with enough courage and enough love, they could find their way not just to light, but to dawn.